Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we, explore a variety of books.
Yeah.
Let's get started. This time, we're diving into James Patterson's House of Cross. I think we both agree it's a real page-turner. And today we're kind of mapping out this tangled plot piece by piece, really picking out those crucial moments and those connections that maybe, you missed on the first go-round. Think of it as like your personalized tour through this corner of the Cross universe within this particular story, right?
Definitely.
So how does Patterson kick things off? Where do we start?
He kind of throws us right into the action with Justice Blevins on her morning run.
Okay, yeah, Watts Branch Park. I remember that.
But what's interesting is like how he immediately kind of sets this tone, right? The ordinary, the everyday routine, but with this like underlying sense of threat.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
You get this really vivid picture of the park in those early morning hours. The light, the crisp air, it's all very like calm and familiar as she's heading toward her usual stretching spot by the footbridge. It's almost like peaceful, just waiting to be disrupted.
Yeah, totally. You can almost feel that rhythm, that like familiar pace of a morning run. I think she's even like a little ahead of schedule, enjoying that quiet time before the day really gets going.
Exactly.
But as she nears those hemlock trees close to the footbridge, that tranquility is like completely shattered.
Oh yeah. And it's so subtle at first, right?
Yeah.
You have this almost imperceptible shift. That odd soft thud that she hears coming from those dense hemlock trees, and then just out of nowhere, the sensation of a slap, like a sharp slap to the side of her head.
Ugh, I remember that part. So jarring.
It's such a strange and inexplicable event. It just like plunges both Justice Blevins and us as readers right into the heart of the mystery. No real build-up, just this sudden, violent intrusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And then from that kind of unsettling attack in the park, we're like immediately transported to a completely different scene, Washington, D.C., in mid-December. It's evening, snow is falling, and we find Judge Emma Franklin leaving work at the Pretty Man U.S. Courthouse, right?
Right, right. And you see how Patterson sort of juxtaposes these two seemingly unrelated events from the very start. It's like he's setting up these parallel narratives that we assume will eventually intersect.
Yeah.
We get this a little glimpse into Judge Franklin's evening, the falling snow, classic D.C. winter vibe, her conversation with her driver, Agnes, about the cold and her upcoming Christmas trip to Miami. It all adds this touch of, normalcy, humanizes her.
For sure.
And then that small detail about her still wearing her wedding band 9 months after her husband's death. That speaks volumes about her, emotional state.
I picked up on that too. That wedding band detail, it definitely adds a layer of like vulnerability to Judge Franklin. And then as they arrive at her home in Alexandria, things take a really dark turn. It goes from a normal homecoming to, something terrifying.
Yeah, it's chilling the way he describes this encounter. I mean, imagine this.
Yeah.
You're pulling into your driveway, snow is falling, headlights are illuminating the street, and then this figure appears, a powerfully built blonde woman just running down the sidewalk right at you. And the details he gives, the reflective vest, the headlamp, the neck gaiter, that fleece headband over those orange lens safety glasses, the hydration backpack,
Right.
it all paints this very specific, almost tactical image.
It's definitely tactical, yeah. Like, this is not some random jogger. As Agnes pulls into the driveway, the runner just, like, approaches with this deliberate, almost predatory stance. And then, bam, with a suppressed pistol, she executes both Judge Franklin and Agnes just like that. The double tap, the lack of casings, it all screams professional, highly skilled.
Right. And it immediately raises the question, what's the connection between these two women? Was it random, or is there something more, a specific reason they were both targeted?
Yeah.
This level of expertise in the killings, it points to, something more than just a crime of opportunity, that suppressed weapon, the absence of shell casings. It's someone who knows what they're doing, someone who is very careful about not leaving evidence behind.
It's definitely unsettling. And then, of course, we have Alex Cross and Ray
Yeah.
Stone when they get the call, and they're thrust into this brutal double homicide case.
What's interesting here is the immediate, personal resonance for Bree. She remembers Judge Franklin from a previous case, the whole tragedy with her husband dying in a plane crash. It adds this layer of personal investment for her.
Right.
And there's also this sense of the broader context, like the upcoming presidential inauguration, the city's on edge, and then this high-profile murder just kind of throws everything into even more turmoil.
It's a lot. You definitely get that feeling reading it. Okay, so Cross and Mahoney, they start their initial investigation at the crime scene. What do they find?
Okay, so this early stage of the investigation yields some really important clues, right? There's the neighbor, Eileen Dawson, and her dachshund, Bernie. I love how Patterson throws in these little details.
Right, the dachshund wearing a Christmas sweater, it's so Patterson.
Yeah, exactly right. But anyway, it's Dawson who actually gives them their first solid lead. Professor Willow Whelan at George Washington University Law School. Apparently, Whelan had a huge grudge against Judge Franklin, had even made threats at a recent fundraiser.
Okay, wow. A potential suspect right off the bat. But then, the very next morning, there's this other piece of shocking news. This time from all the way out in Nevada.
And this is where things start to get really interesting, right? It's like, okay, now we have these geographically disparate events, but they might be forming a pattern. The news reports the death of billionaire Ryan Malcolm in what's being called a Nevada accident. But the circumstances are immediately suspicious, like really suspicious. A man in a wheelchair, alone, on a mountain road in a snowstorm. Even if he's in a van specially equipped for, for his disability, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, and then there's that detail about him being really interested in buying property in this super remote area of the Independence Mountain Range, specifically the Double T Ranch. Why would a tech billionaire be so focused on this isolated spot?
That detail about the Double T Ranch is going to become really, really important as the story unfolds. It hints at a very particular interest that Malcolm had, something specific about that location.
Okay, so we've got a suspicious death in Nevada. Back in Alexandria, the police are able to recover doorbell camera footage from Judge Franklin's residence, right? This feels like a huge break in the case.
What's fascinating here is how, everyday technology plays such a crucial role in modern investigations. This footage provides a timeline, a visual of the runner. It's not perfect. The getaway vehicle's license plate is partially obscured, but they get a fragment, 9UU, and that becomes a vital clue.
So, Cross is digging into Professor Whelan, right? But while that's happening, Bree, who's now working with the Bluestone Group, she's independently investigating Ryan Malcolm's death. Her gut feeling is that it wasn't just an accident.
This is where you see Bree's sharp instincts at work, right?
Hmm.
Even outside of official law enforcement, she's following her hunch, trusts her gut feeling that there's more to Malcolm's death than meets the eye. So she calls High Desert Realty in Elko, Nevada, and speaks to Beverly Butler, who actually went with Malcolm to look at that Double T Ranch. And she learns some interesting stuff.
What kind of stuff?
Well, Butler mentions that Malcolm was worried about overgrazing by this big beef conglomerate that was selling the ranch.
Overgrazing. It seems like a strange thing for a tech billionaire to be concerned about, especially if he's just buying a property.
Exactly. It suggests that Malcolm's interest in the Double T Ranch might have gone way beyond just, acquiring land. And that mention of a big beef conglomerate, it hints at larger forces at play, maybe even a conspiracy.
Okay, so we have Bree working that angle. Back in D.C., Cross and Mahoney, they go to George Washington University to interview Professor Willow Whelan. Right.
Right. And this meeting immediately establishes Whelan's, let's just say she's not the most welcoming person.
I can imagine.
Her response to their presence is, let's just say she's not happy to see them.
Okay.
She denies any involvement in Judge Franklin's death, obviously, but there's a certain, intensity to her denial that makes you wonder. Yeah.
And then there's that whole thing about her drinking too much at the fundraiser, her memory being hazy about that evening that doesn't exactly scream innocence either.
No, not really. And then there are the similarities between Whelan's running gear, the headlamp, reflective vest, gloves, neck gaiter, and the description of the killer from that doorbell footage. It's quite striking.
Definitely hard to ignore. And when Cross and Mahoney show her those stills from the doorbell camera, her reaction is, pretty extreme. She insists it's not her, that she wouldn't wear that color safety glasses at night, that she's being set up.
Right. And so we have to ask, is she being framed, genuinely framed? Or is this a really elaborate attempt to deflect suspicion by focusing on this one tiny detail, the color of the safety glasses?
It's tricky. So things take a turn when Cross and Mahoney get a hit on that partial license plate from the Durango scene near Judge Franklin's house. This feels like a big development.
Oh, yeah. This is a game changer for the investigation, right? That 9U fragment leads them to a silver 2015 Dodge Durango with Maryland plates, 309UU.
Oh, wow.
And guess who it's registered to? Aldo Pearson.
No way. Agnes's husband.
Agnes's husband. And suddenly the possibility of a personal vendetta becomes very real.
Wow. So they get a warrant, head straight to Aldo Pearson's house in Bowie, Maryland. What happens there?
Well, initially, Pearson tries to play the grieving widower, clueless, shocked, the routine. But Mahoney, he doesn't let up. asks some really pointed questions about Pearson's whereabouts that night, and his story starts to fall apart. Eventually, he admits to being near Judge Franklin's street that night. And now, suspicion really starts to mount.
Right, like why was he there? What's he not telling them? Okay, so meanwhile, back at Cross's house, I bet Nana Mama is making an amazing dinner as always. Bree's sharing what she's found out about Malcolm with John Sampson.
Yeah, I love that we see these parallel investigations happening. And this is where things get even more complicated. Bree discovers that the lawyer who represented the Melhor Ranch and Cattle Company in a deal involving, get this, the Circle M Ranch, he was murdered. And it happened right after the sale closed.
Okay, murdered. So we've got another death, potentially connected to a land deal, just like Malcolm was pursuing.
Exactly. It starts to feel like a pattern, a history of violence surrounding these kinds of transactions.
Yeah, and the stakes just keep getting higher. Okay, what else is going on?
Well, this might seem small, but remember, Justice Blevins, she experiences this weird foggy-headedness. It's subtle, but it could be important.
Oh, I see, like a lingering effect from that attack in the park. Or maybe a sign that she's still in danger.
Exactly. It's this little detail that Patterson throws in, this sense of unease, like something else is coming.
Okay, and Bree, she's following that lead about the Circle M Ranch, right? She shares the info with John Sampson.
Yep. That connection between Malcolm and these suspicious deaths related to land deals, it's getting stronger.
Okay, so Cross and Mahoney, what are they up to?
They're following a new lead, this time about Agnes Pearson. They meet with FBI agent Adriana Lopes, and they're looking into Agnes's possible debts to a loan shark named Jean-Jean Papillon.
Loan sharks. Always trouble.
Right. This introduces a possible financial motive into the mix. Maybe Agnes was murdered because of these debts, or maybe it even explains why Aldo Pearson was near Judge Franklin's house that night. They go to one of Papillon's supposed AA meetings, but it's really just a front for his, illegal activities. It all leads to a confrontation and some arrests.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Aldo Pearson never mentioned his wife's debt to Papillon. Another red flag, right?
Definitely makes you wonder what else he's hiding. Okay, so switching gears back to Professor Whelan. Cross and Mahoney, they finally execute that search warrant on her home. What do they find?
So this is where things get a little more complicated with Whelan. Her house, from the outside, it's pretty unassuming, but inside it's surprisingly lavish, like way more luxurious than you'd expect for a law professor.
Interesting.
Right. It suggests that maybe there's some undeclared income, raises questions about her finances. And then they find some personal items in her bathroom that kind of give you a glimpse into her private life, potential vulnerabilities.
I see. And the sporting equipment in the basement, does that tie into anything?
Well, it seems insignificant on its own, but remember the description of the killer. Cross notices these things, the details that could connect seemingly unrelated parts of the case.
He's good at that. Okay, so the story takes us across the country now to San Francisco, and we meet Judge Pack.
Right, and Judge Pack is this really compassionate guy, super concerned about the homeless population in San Francisco. Even as he's achieving all this professional success, he's walking home from the Symphony Hall in the rain. It sets this kind of like melancholy, almost vulnerable mood.
That it's like that vulnerability is just, exploited in this really brutal way. He's attacked, stabbed with a knife. And the description of the attacker is like identical to the person who went after Judge Franklin. A white woman, peasant skirt, Ugg boots, dark hooded raincoat with locks visible. It can't be a coincidence.
No way. It's way too specific to be just random. It establishes this clear link between the murders. We're definitely dealing with the same person operating across state lines.
Mahoney, he sees that connection right away, too, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. He points out that both Pack and Franklin, clerked for Supreme Court justices, around the same time, both had these super successful early careers. They were both from minority backgrounds, and they both lost their spouses recently.
Wow, the parallels are, really significant. It suggests that the killer might be targeting a very particular type of judge, maybe those with connections to the Supreme Court or who share specific life experiences.
Definitely. And this is happening while Bree's independent investigation into Ryan Malcolm is uncovering something huge about his past.
What is it?
Okay, this is big. Bree discovers that Malcolm's guardians were none other than the Alcott family.
The Alcott family, as in the soap fortune Alcotts.
The very same. But even more importantly, she finds out that his biological parents, the Wheelers, they were murdered in a home invasion out west, and that Ryan and his twin brother Sean were adopted after that. It completely contradicts that earlier story about his mom dying from a fall.
Okay, so the story about his parents, it was a lie.
A total fabrication. And then, Bree and Sampson, they find a newspaper article from Boise. It describes the murder of Patricia and Norman Wheeler, stabbed to death in their summer cabin near Sun Valley, Idaho. And the most disturbing part is that their 9-year-old sons, Ryan and Sean, they found the bodies.
Oh, that's horrible.
Right. It adds this whole other layer of trauma to Ryan Malcolm's past. And get this, no DNA evidence, no weapon, no clear motive. This murder, it just adds to the mystery.
Totally. And they contact Finn Oakes, the detective who originally worked on the Wheeler case. He confirms the details, mentions that the boys were hysterical after finding their parents. It's just this awful, traumatic event.
Yeah. That kind of experience at such a young age, it could really, it could have a profound impact,
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got that horrifying backstory. And then in San Francisco, they're able to pull security footage from the Symphony Hall, and it corroborates the attack on Judge Pack. The attacker's appearance, the way she stabs him, it all matches up perfectly. And there's this weird gesture she makes at her neck afterwards.
Right. That gesture, it's strange. Could be a signature, some kind of taunt, or maybe it has some symbolic meaning we haven't figured out yet. It's another little piece of the puzzle.
Definitely. So Cross and Mahoney, they go to Judge Pack's home to investigate, and what do they find?
Well, his house is, like, super clean, almost eerily clean. There are no personal photos anywhere, no mementos, nothing.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's a locked closet, a locked desk. Naturally, it piques their curiosity, and eventually they find this hidden wall safe. Inside, there are files on all sorts of legal cases.
Sounds like Judge Pack might have been keeping some secrets.
Possibly. And right in the middle of all this, Sheldon Alvarez, a wrongful death litigator, shows up. And he's breaking into Judge Pack's house.
Breaking in.
Breaking in. He claims he was at a friend's cabin, but it's a pretty weak alibi. At first, he seems like a suspect, right? But then when he finds out Pack is dead, his reaction is totally genuine, complete shock and grief. And that's when they discover that Alvarez and Pack, they were in a polyamorous relationship.
Wow, another layer of complexity.
Right. It explains why he was breaking in, maybe, but it also just adds to this sense that, there's more to this story than meets the eye.
Definitely. What else is happening with Bree and Sampson?
They're still digging into Malcolm's past. They go back to Finn Oakes, and he tells them that the Wheeler twins, they were actually adopted twice.
Adopted twice?
Yeah, and it might have involved the black market. And this actually lines up with what Teresa May Alcott had said about adopting her sister's twins.
Okay, so something's definitely not right with those adoptions. It seems like there was a deliberate effort to hide Ryan and Sean's true origins.
Absolutely. So despite being really tight on cash, Bree decides to fly to Cleveland for Ryan Malcolm's funeral. She needs to be there, see things for herself.
Makes sense. She always follows her gut.
She does. And Alex, he keeps her updated on the investigation back in D.C. They're checking out Alvarez's alibi, looking into his polyamorous circle, and it seems like he's in the clear.
Okay, so maybe he's not a suspect after all.
Right. Meanwhile, Bree, she's at the funeral in Hunting Valley, Ohio, just observing, trying to see if anything, stands out.
Yeah.
Nothing concrete, but the feeling that something's off persists. Later, she and Alex, they're talking, and they realize they're still missing something crucial about Malcolm's death. The wheelchair, that isolated mountain road, the sudden snowstorm, it's all just, it's just too perfect.
Too convenient.
Exactly, like a staged scene.
It does feel that way.
Right. So Christmas morning comes and goes, a little break from the investigation. But later, Bree, she briefs John on the trip, and she shows him the Google Earth image of the Double T Ranch. And that's when it really clicks, the connection between the ranch and the murder of that attorney involved in the Meller Ranch deal.
Wow. So the land conspiracy, it's becoming more and more real?
Oh, yeah. It's just a much bigger picture, a long-term scheme with huge financial stakes, potentially.
Okay, back in D.C., Mahoney and Cross, they're meeting with Rochelle Dennison, who's from President-elect Winter's transition team. And they're discussing potential Supreme Court nominees.
Right. And Dennison, she initially denies that Judge Franklin was even being considered.
Seriously?
Yeah. Why would she lie about that?
Yeah.
It suggests there's a lot of secrecy around this process, maybe some internal politics we're not privy to.
Okay, but then she contacts them again, right?
She does. And this time, she spills the beans. Judge Franklin was being vetted, but not by the official transition team, by a separate group, private advisors to the president-elect. And get this, Judge Pack was on that list too because of his longtime support. And there's a third name, Professor Nathan Carver.
So the murders, they're directly connected to this Supreme Court selection process. It's a targeted campaign to eliminate these potential nominees. And now Carver's in danger.
Big time.
And Alex, he immediately calls Bree to tell her, right?
Oh, yeah, he fills her in on everything.
Mhm.
And he mentions that Theresa May Alcott, remember her? She's on the panel that put together that list of nominees.
Wow, the connections just keep piling up.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are Bree and Sampson now?
They're in Elko, Nevada, and they finally get to speak with Eldon Boyd, the guy who found Malcolm after the accident. And he's really skeptical about the official ruling. He points out things like skid marks, suggesting Malcolm was trying to avoid something, and the fact that his van only had about a quarter tank of gas.
Okay, so those details, they don't really add up, do they?
Not at all. It seems like someone wanted it to look like an accident, but they didn't cover all their bases. And then there's Deputy Patty Rogers, remember her? She's still super dismissive, almost like she's trying to discourage them from digging any deeper.
So suspicious.
Right. But here's the real kicker. They don't see this, but Rogers makes a call to a janitorial service, and she's reporting unanticipated complications.
A janitorial service, come on.
It's obviously a code word for something way more sinister, right? Someone is watching their every move.
Creep. Okay, so Bree and Sampson, they're getting nowhere in Elko.
Right, so they decide to head to Salmon, Idaho to investigate Malcolm's past, his family history.
Following the trail back to the source.
Exactly. But while they're doing that, Cross and Mahoney get the news that Professor Nathan Carver has been shot outside his home in Athens, Georgia.
Oh, no.
It's a confirmation of their worst fears, the same MO, a woman in running attire. It all links back to the other attacks. And Carver was on that list of potential Supreme Court nominees, so the motive is clear.
It's terrifying how calculated this all is.
It is. But the most disturbing part is what the killer says to Carver on the audio. Maestro knows what you've done. It's over. We finally get a name. Maestro.
Maestro. So this whole thing, it's orchestrated, planned by someone pulling the strings from the shadows.
That's what it looks like. And that phrase, knows what you've done, it implies that the victims, maybe they share a secret, something that Maestro wants to punish them for.
This is getting intense.
It is. Okay, so Bree and Sampson, they arrive in Salmon and find the address of William Malcolm, Ryan Malcolm's uncle, and his wife, Cherise. But their place is, well, it's pretty rundown, a far cry from the wealth Ryan Malcolm had.
Okay, so there's obviously a lot of family history there that we don't know about. It's more complicated than it seems.
Right. And then they go to the Danvers Country Store in North Fork, and they meet Lucille Danvers, who turns out to be Ryan Malcolm's biological mother.
Wow, they found her.
They did. She's devastated when she hears about Ryan's death, and she tells them that she and Billy, that's William, Ryan's uncle, they were paid a lot of money to keep the adoption secret. She even names the lawyer who arranged everything, Mel Allen, who, by the way, is now dead.
So there's the confirmation about the shady adoption. Payment for silence, a dead lawyer. It all points to a cover-up, a deliberate attempt to erase Ryan and Sean's past.
Exactly. And Lucille, she gives them some old photos of the Wheeler family, so now they finally have visual proof that Ryan and Sean were the boys who survived that horrific murder.
Okay, so back in D.C., Cross and Mahoney are trying to figure out where Bree and Sampson are because, of course, they have no cell service. They contact Theresa May Alcott again, ask her specifically about Sean, Ryan's twin brother, and she flat out lies, says Sean died from leukemia years ago.
That lie is huge. It means that Sean is not only alive, but he's probably involved in everything that's happening. Alcott is clearly trying to protect him or whatever it is they're doing.
Okay, so things are getting messy. And then Bree and Sampson, they get ambushed.
I know, it's bad. Brian Toomey and some others, they grab them, force them onto snowmobiles, take them on this terrifying ride in freezing weather before ending up at this isolated, abandoned metal building.
Sounds awful.
It is. And it shows just how far Maestro is willing to go to keep his secrets. They're in serious danger.
This is getting out of control.
And then, through a loudspeaker, Bree and Sampson hear this voice, right? It's this chilling ultimatum. They can either join Maestro's organization or they'll be killed.
So it's not enough to silence them. He wants them to join him.
That's right. It means that Maestro thinks they have something to offer, some skills or resources that could be useful to his cause, whatever that is.
Meanwhile, Cross and Mahoney are trying to track Bree and Sampson down.
Right. They manage to follow Bree's geobit tracker to a remote area in British Columbia. They get help from an RCMP officer, Fagan, and they end up finding what looks like an abandoned mine.
An abandoned mine.
That's right. And inside, they find something completely unexpected. Ryan Malcolm.
What? He's alive.
Alive and well. And guess what? He's Maestro.
Whoa, hold on. So the whole thing about him dying in Nevada, it was all faked.
Exactly. staged to make everyone think he was dead.
This is crazy. Bree was right all along. There was way more to his death than anyone knew.
Right. It's a huge twist, and it changes everything.
Okay, so they finally meet Maestro face to face. Then what happens?
Well, they're formally introduced to his associates, Lucas Bean and Katrina White, who, they call the Sparrow. She's the one who carried out the attacks. And Malcolm, he confirms that, yep, he's Maestro. And it turns out the Sparrow was trained by the GRU.
The GRU, that's like Russian military intelligence, right?
The same. It explains how she's so skilled, so deadly.
Okay, so what's Malcolm's game plan? Why is he doing all of this?
Well, during this super tense dinner, Malcolm launches into this whole speech about how society is, like, on the verge of collapse, how there's too much wealth disparity, corruption everywhere. He sees himself as this, like, necessary evil of force for restoring order.
But his methods are, a little extreme.
To say the least. He tries to justify it all, saying that sometimes you have to do bad things to achieve a greater good.
It's messed up.
It really is. And then he drops this bombshell on Sampson, tells him that there were actually 2 M's contacting him all those years.
2 M's.
Yep, there was him, who was sometimes helpful, and then there was his twin brother, Sean, who was, like, consistently cruel.
Okay, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, and Malcolm apologizes for Sean's behavior, especially after Sampson's wife died. He admits to protecting Sean's secrets.
So there's definitely something dark going on between those brothers. And based on what they learned in Idaho, Cross starts to suspect what one of those secrets might be.
Right. And then Malcolm, he makes him an offer. He wants Alex, Bree, and Sampson to join Maestro. He says he thinks they're misguided, but not corrupt, that they could be valuable assets to his organization.
Wow, an invitation to join the dark side.
It's a dangerous proposition.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm thinks he can convince them to buy into his twisted worldview.
What happens next?
Well, Cross, he can't let it go right. He corners Malcolm, asks him about Sean's past. And Malcolm, he finally breaks down, admits that Sean was abused by their parents, physically abused, and that he was too, but not as badly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it sheds light on their messed up childhood, but it doesn't excuse their actions,
Absolutely not. But this whole Maestro thing, it's starting to make a little more sense.
Right. Like the trauma they experienced, it might have twisted their sense of justice, their way of seeing the world.
But still, they're responsible for their choices.
Definitely. And then Malcolm reveals something truly chilling. He says that it was Sean who first suggested killing their parents after their father whipped him really badly.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They planned it together, made it look like Sean never left the boathouse that night, gave him an alibi.
So it all started way back then with that horrific act.
It's a really dark origin story for Maestro, right? It shows how deep the violence and the twisted thinking runs.
Okay, so this offer to join them, what exactly does that entail?
Well, another operative, Edith, she explains that they basically go back to their normal lives, but they'd be working for Maestro in secret. They'd use Paladin's resources to help further their agenda.
So infiltrate law enforcement, use its power to carry out their own brand of justice.
Exactly. It's a dangerous plan. It could completely destabilize things.
And Bree, she pulls Alex aside, tells him that they